Thanks for joining me. I'm James, and today we'll be talking about using Marketo to improve team efficiency. So many of us will probably have this theme in common on why we've chosen Marketo in the very first place. And so today we'll go through some tips on how we see that you can drive efficiency using Marketo Engage. We've got a few different areas that we're going to talk about today. So a few tips and hints on how to scale effectively using Marketo, some ideas that you might have already thought of, or some different ways to look at certain items. And I'll give you constant tips as we go through. But if you do have any questions about any efficiencies that you're thinking about driving through Marketo, feel free to add them into the Q&A section and I will get to them at the very end. Which will have plenty of time for Q&A. But of course, if I don't get to your question, I will make sure that you get a response back from either myself or one of the members of our team. So let's get underway. For those of you who don't know JTF Marketing, we've been around for coming up to 8 years now, focused specifically on Marketo as a marketing automation platform. And we help businesses of all sizes and all industries basically manage Marketo from day one in terms of what does the implementation look like through to what is the ongoing optimization and management of that platform. And importantly, what else can we do with that? How do we integrate it across our business and how do we scale what it's currently doing? So again, as we talk about the scaling piece, we need to think about efficiencies, which is the topic of today's webinar. So let's jump straight in. So one of the quickest ways to drive efficiency and time saving for your team when using Marketo is actually program templates. And it's normally one of the things that are kind of left to the side. We don't spend enough time working on them, updating them, engaging them. And we've got to keep them maintained because we're in a constant evolution of marketing. And of course, the way that we report or the requirements of the business may change. So when we talk about program templates, they are best practice campaigns that are pre-built in your instance. You'll see the screenshot on the right-hand side where I've got some examples of web pages, case studies, email send programs, downloads, blogs, etc. And that could be as long and as wide as you want it to be in terms of the different options. Of course, what this fundamentally relies on is something called channels and tags. Again, they are the reporting metrics so that you can start to compare like for programs. So for example, where we're running our training programs, we'll have a specific training channel, a specific training program template that will rinse and repeat. What does that mean? It means that we can actually build stuff consistently and then measure consistently as well. It does reduce the overall headache of QA, so quality assurance and quality control. We don't have to keep checking stuff on a regular basis. We know that it's following the structure. Therefore, we can give our teams the right instructions in order to activate the pieces that are relevant to them. Now, within a program template, you might activate everything all at once, or you might do it piece by piece. So when we start looking at some more complex examples, it's important to remember that those are, there is a guide to what best practice looks like, but they don't necessarily always have to be followed. Now you'll notice here, I don't have in my program templates folder any engagement programs. There's a reason for this. They're not very easy to create templates for unless you're using them in very short lifecycle journeys. So let's say you're taking an MQL, a cold MQL, and you want to warm it up. Then maybe you would build a specific nurture to then use, or maybe deploy across multiple regions. But if you're looking at the entire life cycle of a customer, we typically wouldn't do that. It's not efficient to do so because we want to provide a gold standard across all accounts and then work our way into the niche and into the detail. So program templates, really useful. There is another webinar specifically on program templates and tokens. And tokens equally are quite important for program templates because it's what helps us scale. Take the example of a webinar. We're going to have the name of the webinar. We're going to have the date. We're going to have the speaker. These are only variables ultimately in the way that we execute that campaign. As long as that headline is good enough and as long as the promotional emails are good enough, we're going to get people engaging with our webinar because they want to learn something from your business or learn about your products and services. So again, that combination of program templates and tokens, really, really important. Talking of which, there's a couple of different levels of tokens in Marketo, and most of those are already using first name, last name, maybe company name at a push. Again, you can get pretty advanced with these because they work in multiple areas. We have them, of course, at the program level, the My Tokens that we see on the right-hand side in the screenshot, where we can actually tokenize values for images, for content, as well as CTAs. And again, they're integrated into your email or landing page templates, which can then pull in the relevant values. Now, what's important here is actually this can help speed up build time because we're only filling in the blanks or we're replacing default values. So for example, we're sending an invite to, let's say, a VIP dinner. It's not going to come from marketing app. It's probably going to come from the director of the business. Therefore, we can change the sender address and sender name to be that director, and also change the reply to address to go to marketing, who will be doing the logistics. Of course, we always want to drive people to forums to engage. And again, there's some optimizations there as well that you can run. Now, tokens can be used on emails and landing pages. And if you want to get a little bit fancier, you can use velocity scripting, which is a token type. So it's a script, which then can be deployed into an email, and that can build all manner of complicated levels of detail and personalization that you might want to add in. So let's say, for example, it's some notifications from your back-end system, or let's say it's some policy information for the insurance policy that you have with a client, whatever it might be. Again, you can pull it in, group it, personalize it, style it in a way that you want it to be. Now, one of the most important things we talk about a lot in marketing is lead scoring. So how do we engage lead scoring in a tokenized manner? We can also use tokens for it, depending on where you've built your scoring model, whether it's a global scoring model that sits above all of the programs in Marketo, or whether you've integrated into those program templates that we were just talking about. You may be using score fields in different areas. So again, try and use those tokens in order to fill in the gaps as easy as you can. Now, there is a bit of a trick here. Don't go crazy. You'll see this example on the right-hand side where we've got left image, right image, etc., etc. That was excessive tokenization. And actually, what's quite interesting from this is when you start to use tokenized values, you sometimes lose some of the capability to basically see the tracking for those URLs. So you've got to test it, you've got to make sure it's relevant, and importantly, make sure that it's right for you and don't overdo it, basically. Other efficiencies that you can drive in Marketo, one of them is actually also focused on the building of assets, right? So when we talk about program templates, for example, we often link this back to email and landing page templates. Having good templates in your instance is going to really help speed up build time within Marketo. Now, there's something interesting when it comes to linking the two together, which is actually we can almost pre-build the invite for a webinar or the feedback email for a survey, whatever it might be, because we know more or less what the structure is going to look like. The only things we might be changing, again, using tokenized values, might be some dates and times or sender names, etc., or even topics, right? Now, there's a few things that will make your marketer's life easier. One is having these modular blocks that they can drag and drop and reorder into the structure that they want. It being flexible for them to use, so using variables where they don't need to be hacking away at any of the HTML in order to get it to work. And you'll be surprised how many times we hear that. Of course, we want it to be ready for every device, including dark mode, because that's now really important. I think I saw a stat the other day, which is 60% of people are using their devices permanently in dark mode, which again is kind of interesting when you start to get into rendering and how does that look and how do your images even perform in a dark mode browser or email client. And then importantly, we want to integrate UTMs. Now, UTMs, Universal Tracking Metrics, I think they're called. I can't remember if ever the full name, but these are UTM tracking links that you can apply to a URL, which will allow you to track the success of the click-through of your campaign, so the origin or the campaign type. And most of us using Google Analytics or even Adobe Analytics will be able to pick up that information and then process them into our reporting. Now, why is that really important? Because actually, if you want to start tracking success, even from your downloads that you're building and distributing through Marketo, we want to be using UTMs to say, okay, we promoted that webinar through 5 different channels, but we got most of the signups through social media, so through LinkedIn, for example. You can start to do that by building in those UTMs. There's kind of multiple parts to that, and I'm drifting into the topic of attribution, but ultimately getting the data back into Marketo, getting it back into your analytics tools is important, and doing it in an automated fashion, right? So your email templates in Marketo can have this built in by default, so you don't have to worry about it. Again, we use often program name, the token, for the campaign name that we then pass into the analytics platform. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about some more tips around email marketing, there is a great download on our website. It's been very popular, Email Marketing Masterclass for Marketo. Go and download it. It's in our resources section, and we'll send these slides afterwards, by the way, so the link will be in here as well. And of course, it's got a UTM on it, right? Because we're tracking. Other efficiencies can be starting to use dynamic content, and there's a big fat asterisk next to this, which is you could actually overcomplicate things and not be as efficient by using dynamic content. So we're going to be really careful where we apply it. Make sure it's only when it's relevant, and make sure that you are working to a scalable or a manageable level of personalization when it comes to dynamic content. But it can help us, especially when we've got always on campaigns, right? So again, how do we deploy content that's relevant, personalized to those individuals, that drives a better experience for the customer and ultimately gets us those conversions that we want? We might actually choose to change the CTA in order to be more efficient. So rather than get the person to fill out a form, get them to then get an email from a salesperson, so on and so forth, we might just change it to a direct booking link. So book directly with the salesperson in order to have a conversation about this product or service. Great when you're doing upsells and cross sells, by the way. Again, you might want to use velocity scripting here to say, if they've got that product already, or they bought it 6 months ago, or they're engaging. I was just answering a question on one of the user groups this morning around scoring around products for upsell and cross sell. So again, if they're starting to engage with a product that they've previously purchased and they're all over your website clicking around, you might want to shift up the content type again there in order to engage them, to find out what's happening, why are they not engaging. Anyway, drifting into lead scoring. As ever with Marketo, everything starts to interlink, right? The important thing when it comes to dynamic content is it can only be applied to one module or one section at a time. So depending on how you built your template, the example on the screen, you might only be optimizing the image, you might be optimizing only the headline, the CTA. Again, if you need more levels of complexity, then definitely look at some velocity scripting. Now, the efficiencies come from using commonalities. And again, it might be imagery, it might be CTAs, it might even be snippets for your footers at the bottom of your emails. So again, where they're dynamic based on language, will definitely help you scale your activity. So again, think about all those optimizations. It could be all those repetitive tasks that you've got to keep checking. Most of them can be automated within Marketo. We've talked a little bit about channels and tags already. This is really important. Again, if you're struggling to get the reports out of Marketo that you want, it's often because you haven't configured channels and tags in the right way. And depending on what you're measuring, it might be beyond clicks, opens, delivered, etc. And I dare I say that amongst a marketing audience, but it's not the be all and end all. These are easy metrics to report on. You get them from an email performance report, but they don't determine success all the time. So in an example where we have a download, our success is actually filled out form. But if you were tracking an e-commerce product, for example, and you want to track it through Marketo, you might be tracking whether they've been engaging with that product, whether they've never engaged with it at all, whether they've purchased, whether they've applied to purchase it or inquired. So you can see there's different stages. So I always talk about these as mini funnels, depending on how you're building stuff in Marketo, depending how far you want to go with your automation, it's really important. But the efficiency piece is actually, if we've got good channels and tags, we're using them with program templates consistently. We're actually updating the progression statuses because annoyingly Marketo doesn't do it automatically. We've got to put people in each one of those little statuses individually. We will then be able to compare like for like. What is the best performing download of the business? What is the worst webinar invite we've ever sent? Again, you can start to group those together, not only at a program level, but also from an email performance or a people performance perspective. Again, it's really important that you get them into your campaigns and your team are consistently using them. The other thing is using period costs and making sure that you're applying a cost to each program that's built. So you'll see here in the screenshot, we've got analytics behavior, normal requires cost period. If you don't want it to be included because it's a lead scoring program, for example, change it to operational. So that will start to exclude it from any reporting. This is important if you want to get to ROI reporting in Marketo. So again, if you're trying to build optimizations into seeing where did I get most new names from in the last 3 months, again, you can start to use some of these reports. What was the cost per new name in the last 3 months? The average is X, so on and so forth. Really, really important. When we're looking at engagement programs, there is a number of efficiencies here in terms of the value that you get back from an engagement program. They're probably one of the most complicated areas of Marketo, and it definitely takes some time to get your head around exactly what is it that you're looking at and how can you use it. Now, there's 2 ways to build a nurture campaign. One is, and it's not good or bad, by the way, one is using emails directly into each one of the streams. The other is using embedded programs. Both actually provide different results that might or may not help you optimize depending on the time you have available to you. If you're looking for efficiencies, you're wanting to test different messages, use email assets in streams, because actually you can use something called the engagement score, which is this thing down here in the right-hand corner, as well as the overall score here on the screenshot on the summary. Now, what does this give us? It gives us a calculated score using an algorithm that basically says, how good was our content? Of course, it's important to know whether our content was any good, because we might need to optimize it at a later point. So again, we might take the worst performing content, compare it to the highest performing content and say, well, why didn't that work? What was it? What were we expecting to happen? What did happen? And therefore, what can we do to then optimize it moving forward? So again, you're going to be looking at email metrics here in order to improve. If you're using embedded programs in Marketo, you get a bit of a different result because it all depends on the success of that channel. So if you're embedding a download, for example, you will only get a high score if a large volume of people you've targeted have actually downloaded the asset that you have sent to them and your progression statuses are in play. If you don't have progression statuses in play for embedded programs and nurture campaigns, you're not going to get any results and you're not going to see anything useful. But you've also got in here the ability to understand what's happening, right? So when we look at this exhaustion table, we can see on the last cast, where did we end up? How many people have received or haven't received content? And do we need to create more content? So this big myth that for engagement programs, we've got to build lots of content up front is not necessarily true. You do have to have a regular cadence of content in order to keep it live and keep it engaged, keep it active. And again, we should be using the stats from this in order to manipulate the numbers and see, you know, exactly where do we get to? How do we make sure that we're optimizing on an ongoing basis? The big question I always get asked around, let's say, optimization of engagement programs is what should the velocity look like? This really depends on your nurture, depends how you've set it up, depends on how many different streams you've got, how much content you've got. So you may want to start slower, increase the velocity over time. You may want to warm that prospect up depending on whether you're acquiring them for the very first time. And again, looking at ways in which you can play around with it and A/B test, that's the most important part. So whizzing through here, of course, one thing that drives efficiency across a marketing team using Marketo is always going to be training. Training is probably one of the most underfunded areas in marketing. And I'm sure some of you are sitting there nodding your heads at that. There is various ways to learn Marketo, and sometimes the worst thing that you can do is actually go poking around in Marketing Nation, which our friends at Adobe will always tell you, because it's great. There's lots of information in there, but how do you find the most recent, the most up-to-date, the most relevant, which actually helps you solve your problem? So sometimes you end up spending more time trying to find the answer than you should do. There's kind of multiple ways that you can do this. One is outsource your training program. I'll put a little nudge in there to say that we do have training programs, in person, virtual, and also online self-paced activities. Get some help desk sessions in your diary. So if you've got multiple users, if you're supporting multiple users, get them to come to you on a regular basis or submit tickets, depending on how you work internally, in order to work through some of those Q&A. And again, you might want to pull in experts to do specific talks on, let's focus in on lead scoring this week, and we're going to learn more about it as a team and find out what works. As I mentioned already, self-paced trading, again, finding the information yourself or using a structured course in order to get more information about how can you apply Marketo to your business. And then also think about mixing up the content style. So there is Marketo user groups that you can go to in person or virtually. There is also a range of events that are kicking around as well, which are definitely worth attending, and just thinking, you know, how would I do this? What does that mean? How do I optimize? Again, the efficiencies here is that your team or yourself are learning more about the platform and how to scale it. One of the things that we try to do at JTF Marketing, always try and provide you with lots of different use cases and scenarios on how you can apply it. So if we've mentioned something and you want to know a little bit more about it, then let us know. We're happy to spend the time just going through in a bit more detail what something might look like in the scenario of your business. And here you go, a lovely plug from our marketing team and a sloppy bullet point, that's fine. We've got basically our training courses are live. So we've got our online training courses that are already out there and live, available through our website. We're launching a new virtual 6-weekly training course. So it's going to be like a virtual boot camp, a couple hours every week, focused in on learning Marketo from the basics. We're also going to be having some office hour sessions with that as well, in order to, you know, pick up any ad hoc questions. So it's going to launch pretty soon, 17th of April, just after Easter. So definitely get registered for that if it's interesting, or let one of your colleagues know if they'd like to register and join us on that. Or if you prefer to learn in person, we've got some events coming up in London, in Madrid, and in Munich. Again, these links are on our website on jtfmarketing.co/training, or you'll get these slides afterwards so you can click through on the links. And then finally, before we jump into the Q&A, if some of you are sitting around going, oh, I'm not sure if we've got channels and tags ready, or I'm not quite sure what kind of reporting metrics we might need, or what we're actually using well or not in Marketo, we run regular free Marketo audits in order to drive better visibility of how you're using the platform, and importantly, what you've paid for, and equally looking for some action points, right, that you can take away internally, or that you can work with a partner like ourselves in order to execute. So again, depending on how you want to look at your Marketo instance, if you're happy sending emails and you're happy with your maturity, fantastic, and kudos to you. If you're thinking, there's probably an opportunity here to do something a little bit smarter, again, we're happy to give you our opinion, which it is, and then use this very helpful report, which we've been running for the last probably 2 years now, to give you better insights into how you're using Marketo. Again, the link will be on here. Otherwise, you can get to it through our website. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be publishing our next webinar pretty quick, and we hope that these are informative. Again, if there's any ideas or any topics that you'd like us to dive into and talk about, I'd love to know what they are. I'd love to hear from you guys to see what would you like to see next from JTF Marketing. And then we hope to see you on the next webinar very soon.